This is an odd thing for a lot of you probably to hear, but farmers will soon be able to fix their own farm equipment. It's a big deal. It took a new agreement between the American Farm Bureau Federation and John Deere.
Case IH, those iconic red tractors that have powered American farms for generations, just did something that sent shockwaves through rural communities nationwide. On April 1st, 2025, they froze all production shipments without warning. Not maintenance, not upgrades. A complete halt that left farmers staring at empty fields during planting season. But here's what nobody's telling you. Why did this happen now? What do the billion-dollar losses really mean for your grocery bills? And how did American trade policy accidentally hand our agricultural independence to foreign competitors? Stick around. This is just the beginning. The workers who built America's farming backbone have found a way to fight back that nobody saw coming. The tariff trigger. Behind the factory gates, CNH executives were grappling with an impossible equation that would reshape the entire agricultural equipment industry. President Trump's tariff announcements had created a pricing nightmare that traditional business models couldn't solve. 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports directly impacted manufacturing costs. 20% tariffs on European components affected supply chains built over decades. The mathematics were brutal and immediate. A Case IH Steiger tractor that cost farmers $150,000 could see price increases of $20,000 to $30,000 overnight. Combine harvesters approaching $500,000 might require additional surcharges that would price them beyond the reach of medium-sized farming operations. Equipment that had been competitively priced against international alternatives suddenly faced a massive disadvantage in global markets. CNH's manufacturing strategy had been optimized for a world of relatively free trade. The company sourced 70% of its parts from the United States, 9% from Canada and Mexico, but critical components still originated from overseas suppliers. Factories in Racine, Wisconsin, and Fargo, North Dakota, assembled tractors using components manufactured across multiple countries. The Grand Island, Nebraska facility produced combines with sophisticated technology developed through international partnerships. Chief Executive Officer Garrett Marks faced impossible choices during emergency board meetings: absorb the tariff costs and destroy profit margins, or pass them to customers and lose market share to competitors. The company's financial projections painted a sobering picture. First quarter sales had already declined 23% compared to the previous year. Industry-wide demand for high-horsepower tractors was projected to fall 25 to 35% throughout 2025. The tariff uncertainty threatened to accelerate these trends into a full industry collapse. But Marks and his executive team had no idea that their temporary pause would trigger a cascade of events that would fundamentally alter American agriculture forever. The real shock was still coming: the ripple effect. The abrupt shipment halt by CNH triggered chaos across the agricultural equipment industry. Dealers were forced to cancel promised deliveries, leading to broken contracts, delayed financing, and urgent renegotiations of insurance policies. Transportation companies specializing in heavy equipment saw their schedules unravel within hours, while logistics teams scrambled to salvage routes. Local businesses tied to CNH manufacturing operations faced immediate revenue losses, putting many on the brink of collapse. The timing could not have been worse. Spring planting season is the most critical period in American agriculture. Farmers rely on narrow planting windows defined by weather, soil, and crop biology. Any equipment delay during this time can ruin an entire season. The CNH freeze left farmers across multiple states scrambling for alternatives, jeopardizing food production at a national scale. At the manufacturing level, uncertainty spread quickly. While factories kept running, employees feared for their jobs as rumors circulated about potential closures. Union leaders held emergency meetings. Local officials quietly prepared contingency plans in anticipation of large-scale economic fallout. Misinformation on social media added to the confusion. Viral videos falsely claimed total factory shutdowns and mass layoffs, racking up hundreds of thousands of views. Meanwhile, industry insiders and economists tried to clarify facts, warning that the actual crisis was different, but no less severe. The reality check. What made this crisis particularly devastating was how it exposed the shocking fragility of modern agricultural systems that most Americans never realized existed. Farming operations had become increasingly dependent on sophisticated, expensive equipment manufactured by just a handful of global companies. The consolidation of the agricultural machinery industry meant that disruptions at major manufacturers created systemic vulnerabilities that could threaten the entire food supply chain. The actual numbers emerging from CNH's operations told a sobering story that contradicted much of the viral misinformation. The company had indeed laid off nearly 400 workers from facilities in Fargo, North Dakota, and Benson, Minnesota, due to declining demand. The Burlington, Iowa plant faced closure plans that would eliminate hundreds more jobs. These weren't the massive shutdowns depicted in sensationalized online content, but they represented real hardships for affected communities and families. Agricultural economists began calculating the broader implications that stretched far beyond individual company struggles. Equipment shortages during critical planting season could reduce crop yields across multiple states. Higher equipment costs would pressure farm profitability already squeezed by volatile commodity prices. International competitors might gain permanent market share that would be impossible to recover once lost. The pause that began as a temporary tariff assessment was rapidly becoming a permanent competitive disadvantage for American agricultural equipment manufacturing. CNH's factories weren't just shut down temporarily, they were trapped in an economic vice that was tightening with each passing day. The company's stock price reflected investor panic as shares plummeted in volatile trading sessions. The story emerging from CNH's factories wasn't just about one company's struggle with trade policy complications. It revealed fundamental tensions between global economic integration and national industrial policy that were tearing apart the foundation of American agricultural independence. The equipment that fed America was caught between competing visions of economic strategy, and the consequences would be measured in both corporate balance sheets and rural community survival. The most shocking revelation was still hidden in the financial data that company executives were desperately trying to understand themselves. The numbers would reveal a crisis that threatened to reshape American agriculture forever. The collapse in numbers. The spreadsheets told a story no one wanted to read, an industry in free fall. When CNH Industrial released their first quarter 2025 financial results, the numbers revealed a catastrophe that made the shipment halt look like a minor inconvenience. Net sales had plummeted 23% compared to the same period in 2024, representing a staggering loss of nearly $1 billion in revenue. The agriculture division bore the heaviest blow, with sales crashing from $3,373 million to $2,580 million. Net income collapsed even more dramatically, falling from $369 million to just $132 million. A devastating 64% decline that sent shockwaves through Wall Street trading floors. Chief Executive Officer Garrett Marks faced hostile shareholders during the earnings call. His voice strained as he delivered projections that painted an even bleaker picture. The company now expected 2025 sales to decline between 12 and 20% year over year. High horsepower tractor demand across all manufacturers was projected to fall 25 to 35%, while combined sales faced an even steeper decline of 20 to 30%. Maria Santos, a financial analyst who had covered agricultural equipment for 15 years, watched her retirement portfolio evaporate as CNH stock prices plummeted 12% in a single trading session. Equipment dealers across the Midwest faced their own financial reckoning as inventory financing became increasingly expensive and customer demand disappeared. The industry-wide tractor sales decline of 34% in the fourth quarter of 2024 had been a warning signal that few had heeded. Now the full scope of the agricultural equipment apocalypse was becoming clear, and the worst revelations were yet to come. The human cost calculator. When economists count job losses, they rarely calculate the dreams destroyed with each pink slip. CNH's workforce reductions weren't just statistical entries. They represented the systematic dismantling of skilled manufacturing expertise built over generations. The Fargo, North Dakota plant elimination of 198 hourly positions hit the community like an economic earthquake. Carrie Fry, workforce center manager at the Fargo Job Service North Dakota office, watched families struggle with impossible decisions. Should they relocate to find similar manufacturing work? Could they retrain for different industries? How would mortgage payments continue during extended unemployment? The Benson, Minnesota facility layoffs affecting 175 workers created ripple effects that economists measured using multiplier calculations. Each direct manufacturing job typically supported 4.6 additional positions throughout the broader economy. The mathematical reality meant that 739 additional jobs would disappear from the Benson area economy through secondary impacts. Union representatives at the International Association of Machinists provided every available resource for displaced members, but the scale of the crisis overwhelmed traditional support systems. Local churches organized food banks, while credit unions offered emergency loan modifications. The social fabric of these manufacturing communities was stretching toward a breaking point that threatened permanent damage. Manufacturing workers who had believed in the stability of American industrial employment faced a crisis of faith that would reshape their understanding of economic security. The numbers measuring unemployment duration and benefit exhaustion would soon reveal the true depth of human suffering hidden behind corporate restructuring announcements. The supply chain fracture. Modern agriculture runs on an intricate web of dependencies, and that web was unraveling with devastating speed. CNH's supply chain crisis exposed the shocking vulnerability of American food production to global manufacturing disruptions. The company's 70% domestic parts sourcing had seemed like a strength until tariffs made the remaining 30% prohibitively expensive. Michael Chen, Chief Executive Officer of Precision Hydraulics in Muncie, Indiana, gathered his employees to deliver news that would shatter their world. After 38 years supplying CNH with specialized components, 70% of their business had disappeared overnight. The company that had weathered recessions, trade wars, and pandemics faced an existential threat that no amount of experience had prepared them to handle. The cascade effect spread through thousands of specialized American manufacturers who had built their operations around CNH contracts, custom component fabricators, electronic suppliers, and specialized tool makers, all concentrated within 500 miles of CNH plants, faced similar devastation. These weren't large corporations with diversified customer bases. They were family-owned businesses that had invested everything in relationships with major equipment manufacturers. The steel and aluminum tariffs created a pricing nightmare that rippled through every level of manufacturing. Components that had cost $50 suddenly required $75, destroying carefully calculated profit margins. European technology imports faced 20% surcharges that made sophisticated agricultural innovations economically impossible for many farmers to afford. The just-in-time delivery systems that had made modern manufacturing efficient became liabilities during supply chain chaos. Empty warehouses and delayed component deliveries created production bottlenecks that would take months to resolve. Even if supplier relationships could be quickly restored. The market share massacre. For CNH, market share wasn't just a metric, it was survival. And in early 2025, that share was collapsing. Once holding 27% of North America's agricultural equipment market, CNH now faced projections dipping below 20% within a year. John Deere saw blood in the water. Timothy Wright, Deere's regional sales director, led aggressive efforts to flip longtime CNH dealers by offering immediate inventory and favorable financing. For many, it was an offer they couldn't refuse. Dealers who had sold Case IH exclusively for decades, like Robert Thompson, a 34-year veteran, abandoned the brand to avoid bankruptcy. Swapping out the iconic red signage wasn't just a business decision, it was an emotional severing of rural partnerships built over generations. European brands moved fast. Tariff disruptions gave them a rare opening. Suddenly, U.S. dealers unable to stock Case IH machines welcomed German and Italian equipment manufacturers they once ignored. The very tariffs meant to protect American production were handing foreign competitors permanent market access. Farmers, too, were forced to adapt. With spring planting and fall harvest windows narrowing, equipment availability mattered more than heritage or pride. Delays turned loyal Case 1H customers into reluctant buyers of unfamiliar brands. The damage went beyond lost sales. It was about lost trust. Wall Street took notice. CNH's stock slumped, while shares of rivals surged. emerged. What began as a temporary shipment pause had now hardened into a structural disadvantage, one that could take years to repair. And the final blow, it was not from within. It came from global competitors who capitalized on America's trade policies to solidify their grip on a market CNH once dominated. The red tractors were fading, not from mechanical failure, but from economic betrayal. The policy earthquake. Trade wars aren't fought with bullets, they're fought with balance sheets, and the casualties are counted in communities. President Trump's tariff strategy had created an economic weapon that was destroying its intended target, American manufacturing. The 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum, combined with 20% surcharges on European components, weren't protecting domestic industry. They were systematically dismantling it. CNH's executives found themselves trapped in an impossible mathematical prison. Manufacturing costs had exploded overnight while international competitors operated without similar constraints. A Case IH tractor that competed globally at $150,000 now required $200,000 to maintain the same profit margins. The arithmetic of international competition had fundamentally shifted against American manufacturers. Trade negotiators in Washington had miscalculated the global nature of modern manufacturing. They envisioned tariffs forcing companies to relocate production to the United States, but the reality proved devastatingly different. Complex agricultural equipment required supply chains built over decades, technical expertise concentrated in specific regions, and manufacturing relationships that couldn't be quickly replicated. The unintended consequences were becoming visible across American manufacturing communities. The policies designed to bring jobs back to American soil were instead accelerating their departure to countries that offered stable, predictable trade relationships. The weapons designed to protect American industry were destroying it from within, but the global response would prove even more devastating to America's agricultural independence. The global chess game. While America built walls, the rest of the world was building bridges and capturing market share. European agricultural equipment manufacturers viewed the American tariff crisis as a historic opportunity to establish permanent footholds in the world's largest agricultural market. Companies like Fendt and Claas began aggressive expansion strategies, targeting CNH's vulnerable dealer networks. Chinese agricultural equipment producers accelerated their North American market entry plans. YTO Group and other manufacturers had been gradually building capabilities to serve Western markets. The CNH crisis provided an opening to demonstrate their equipment reliability, while American companies struggled with pricing disadvantages and supply chain disruptions. Brazilian and Indian manufacturers recognized that American tariff policies were creating global competitive advantages they had never enjoyed. These emerging industrial powers could now compete directly with American equipment manufacturers in international markets, where CNH had previously dominated through superior technology and established relationships. The global agricultural equipment industry was reorganizing around America, not with it. International customers who had preferred American-made machinery began exploring alternatives as CNH's pricing became uncompetitive. Export markets that had supported American manufacturing jobs were migrating to competitors who offered similar quality without tariff-inflated costs. Foreign governments actively courted, displaced American agricultural technology expertise. Countries that had struggled to develop sophisticated manufacturing capabilities suddenly found experienced engineers and managers available due to American plant closures and industry uncertainty. The most alarming development was the rapid formation of international manufacturing alliances specifically designed to bypass American tariff policies while capturing American market share. The innovation exodus. When factories close, they don't just take jobs, they take the future with them. CNH's crisis was accelerating a brain drain that threatened America's technological leadership in agricultural innovation. The research and development teams that had created precision farming technology, autonomous equipment systems, and advanced crop management software faced uncertain futures as company budgets contracted. Engineering talent that had defined American agricultural equipment superiority began receiving recruitment offers from international competitors. European and Asian manufacturers offered attractive packages to acquire the technical knowledge that had made American equipment the global standard. The intellectual capital accumulated over generations of American innovation was scattering to competitors worldwide. University partnerships that had sustained agricultural technology advancement faced immediate disruption. Iowa State University, University of Illinois, and other institutions that had collaborated with CNH on breakthrough technologies found their research funding threatened. The pipeline that had produced the next generation of agricultural engineers was breaking down precisely when American agriculture needed innovation most. Patent filings and technology development were beginning to shift toward countries that offered stable business environments and predictable trade policies. The innovation ecosystem that had made America the leader in agricultural technology was fragmenting as companies sought more reliable bases for long-term research investments. America wasn't just losing manufacturing capacity. It was losing its technological edge in feeding the world, and the consequences would reshape global food production for decades to come. The price of protection. Economic protection comes with a cost, and someone always pays the bill. The tariff policies implemented to save American manufacturing jobs were systematically destroying more employment than they protected. Every job, theoretically saved in steel production, eliminated multiple positions in equipment manufacturing, transportation, and agricultural services that depended on competitive American machinery. The mathematics of protectionism revealed a devastating truth. The cost of protection exceeded its benefits by enormous margins. Equipment price increases that made American farmers less competitive in global markets threatened the entire agricultural export economy that employed millions of Americans. The cure was proving more devastating than the disease it was meant to treat. Consumer purchasing power eroded as equipment costs escalated beyond the reach of medium-sized farming operations. Family farms that had survived multiple economic downturns faced equipment costs that could force consolidation or bankruptcy. The tariff policies designed to protect American workers were threatening the farmers who purchased American-made equipment. Policymakers found themselves trapped between admitting failure and doubling down on strategies that were clearly backfiring. The political cost of reversing course seemed prohibitive, even as evidence mounted that the policies were achieving the opposite of their intended effects. The hidden revelation that would emerge from community responses would prove that American resilience could overcome even the most misguided policy disasters. The Heartland Reckoning. When the factory whistle stops blowing, an entire community holds its breath. Mayor Thomas Wilson of Racine, Wisconsin, stood in the massive empty CNH facility that had once employed thousands of workers and generated millions in tax revenue. The cavernous space echoed with the ghosts of American manufacturing prosperity. But Wilson wasn't there to mourn. He was there to plan a resurrection that would redefine what industrial recovery could look like. The economic multiplier effects were devastating and immediate. Fargo's unemployment rate spiked as ripple effects spread through local businesses. Restaurants that had served factory workers saw revenues collapse. Auto dealerships faced loan defaults and inventory buildups. School districts confronted declining enrollment as families relocated to find employment opportunities. Local governments faced impossible budget calculations as tax revenues evaporated precisely when community needs increased. Essential services required cuts during periods when unemployed residents needed them most. Emergency assistance programs stretched beyond capacity, while the tax base that funded them shrank dramatically. Community leaders across affected regions began developing economic diversification strategies that didn't depend on single large employers. The CNH crisis had revealed the dangerous vulnerability of communities built around one industry. The lesson was clear. Resilience required diversification, adaptability, and local control over economic development. These communities faced a choice that would define their futures: adapt through innovation or disappear through economic decline. The response would surprise even the most optimistic observers: the worker revolution. Sometimes the greatest transformations come from the bottom up, not the top down. The displaced workers from CNH facilities weren't accepting their fate passively. They were organizing, innovating, and creating alternative economic models that challenged traditional assumptions about manufacturing employment. Union representatives at the International Association of Machinists launched unprecedented retraining initiatives that went far beyond traditional job placement services. They partnered with community colleges to develop programs that transformed agricultural equipment manufacturing skills into renewable energy installation, precision manufacturing for medical devices, and advanced materials production. The workers who had built tractors were learning to build wind turbine components and electric vehicle parts. Sarah Martinez, a former CNH assembly line supervisor, led efforts to establish worker-owned cooperative manufacturing businesses. Her team of displaced colleagues pooled unemployment benefits and severance payments to purchase equipment and secure contracts for specialized manufacturing projects. The cooperative model allowed workers to maintain ownership and control over their economic destinies, rather than depending on corporate decisions made in distant boardrooms. Community colleges reported unprecedented enrollment in technical programs as displaced workers reinvented their career paths. The crisis had created a hunger for skills that couldn't be outsourced or eliminated by corporate restructuring decisions. Local educational institutions became incubators for the next generation of American manufacturing expertise. The transformation was creating something unprecedented: worker-controlled manufacturing that prioritized community stability over corporate profit margins. But the agricultural sector itself was undergoing an equally dramatic evolution: the agricultural adaptation. Farmers have always been innovators. Now they needed to innovate their entire business model. The equipment crisis had forced agricultural operations to fundamentally rethink their dependence on expensive, corporation-controlled machinery. What emerged was a renaissance of agricultural cooperation and technological creativity that challenged industry assumptions about farming efficiency. Equipment-sharing cooperatives exploded across rural America as farmers pooled resources to purchase machinery collectively. The Prairie Alliance Cooperative in Iowa grew from 50-member farms to over 300 within 18 months. Members reduced individual capital requirements by 70%, while actually increasing access to specialized equipment that would have been impossible to afford individually. Technology adoption accelerated as farmers embraced precision agriculture solutions that maximize productivity from existing equipment. Drone-based monitoring systems replaced multiple tractor passes for crop assessment. Soil sensors and satellite imagery enabled targeted applications that reduced equipment usage while improving yields. The crisis had forced efficiency innovations that made farming more profitable and environmentally sustainable. Multi-generational farm families discovered that combining traditional knowledge with modern technology created competitive advantages that large corporate operations couldn't match. Emma Rodriguez, a 26-year-old farmer, worked alongside her grandfather to implement rotation systems that reduced machinery requirements while improving soil health and crop diversity. Direct marketing relationships with consumers allowed farmers to capture higher prices that offset increased equipment costs. Community-supported agriculture programs, farmers markets, and regional food distribution networks reduced dependence on commodity markets while building local economic resilience. The crisis had strengthened rather than weakened the agricultural community's ability to adapt and thrive, creating innovations that would reshape farming for generations. The lessons learned. Every crisis teaches lessons. The question is whether anyone is listening. The CNH production freeze had revealed fundamental truths about American economic resilience that went far beyond agricultural equipment manufacturing. Communities that survived and thrived shared common characteristics. They diversified their economic foundations, invested in local education and innovation, and maintained control over their economic development strategies. The policy failures that had triggered the crisis provided clear guidance for future industrial strategy. Protectionist policies that ignored global economic realities created more problems than they solved. Effective economic development required understanding complex supply chains, international relationships, and technological dependencies that couldn't be wished away through tariffs or political rhetoric. The worker and community responses demonstrated that American innovation and entrepreneurship remained powerful forces when given opportunities to flourish. The displaced workers who created cooperative businesses, the farmers who developed equipment-sharing networks, and the communities that reinvented their economic models proved that resilience was alive and well in America's heartland. But what do you think? Is real economic security built by governments and corporations, or by the people who adapt and rebuild when everything falls apart? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone. Thanks for watching.